Hey friends, it's Tomer, and in this video I'm going to be analyzing and ranking the new Murders at Karlov Manor Commander pre-constructed decks. I'm going to explain each of the deck's goals, highlight its strengths and weaknesses, give 10 quick upgrades to each of the decks, and then finally rank all of the decks in a handy dandy tier list. But before we begin, a quick reminder that you can buy these brand new precons over at our sponsor, cardkingdom.com/mtggoldfish. We begin with Deadly Disguise, which is the brand new Naya Face Down Matters precon deck. The face commander of the deck, Kaust, is very much combat focused. It's all about attacking with your face down creatures, and then Kaust can flip it up when it's attacking and also draw you cards when it's flipped up and attacking. So unlike the previous face down precon, the Sultai one with Kadena, which is very much a controlling Dirtle deck, this Naya precon with Kaust is very combat focused, looking to generate value from attacking with Kaust and Toski and other type of cards like that, and the win condition is combat damage with face up beats like the Giant Crows and Cloud Scraper, which is my personal favorite. Now let's check out the stats to see how well the deck actually performs its goals. And it's very tight on the archetype. There are 31 cards that put face down creatures onto the battlefield, either cards with Cloak/Morph, which is like cards like Den Protector, or manifesting other cards from your library onto the battlefield like Whisperwood Elemental. And then there are 12 cards that specifically support face down cards like Panoptic Projector, which allows you to put cards face down for 0 mana, and it also doubles the triggered abilities when you flip them face up. So the deck is 100% focused on face down matters. It has a nice collection of Cloak, Morph, and Manifest all working together, and it doesn't have a lot of other sub-themes to kind of muddy the waters. Now let's check out the deck's ratios. As I often explain in my Budget Commander articles and videos, every time I build a rough draft of a deck, I make sure to have a certain ratio of mana, interaction, card advantages, etc. This gives me a reference point to compare to the deck and see which areas may need improvement. My general ratio is 50 mana, lands and ramp, usually a 37-13 split, 10 card draw, cards that need 2 or more cards in hand, 8 targeted removal, split between creature, artifact, and enchantment removal and counter magic, 3 board wipes, creature light decks might want 1 more, and creature heavy decks might want 1 less, 2 graveyard recursion, 2 flexible tutors. At higher budgets, I recommend more tutors, 1 graveyard hate to keep graveyard decks honest, and at least 1 finisher, something that could win games the turn you cast it without too much setup. That's always my starting point, which is then tweaked to suit the individual deck strategy and further tweaked with playtesting. Every deck is going to deviate from these ratios at least somewhat, but I always find this ratio immensely useful to figure out quick ways to fix or improve a deck. Like if a deck doesn't have any targeted removal, for example, that would be something that would need to be addressed. So for Deadly Disguise, I count 50 mana, 37 lands, and 13 ramp. Most of the ramp is based on either playing face down cards for free, like Scroll of Fate, or flipping them up for free, like Ugin's Mastery. So most of them are not conventional ramp, but they work as ramp in this specific deck. Then we've got 15 card draw, a mix of regular draw, like Orin Frostfang, and face down related draw, like Trail of Mystery or True Identity. And also incremental draw from manifesting the top card of your library repeatedly, like Veiled Ascension. There's also 8 targeted removal, a nice mix of permanent removal, like Ionok Survivalist to disenchant and Temur War Shaman to take out opposing creatures with fight. We've also got 4 board wipes, 2 taking advantage of the face down creature's small size, so like Fell the Mighty and Dustodon work very well with face down creatures because they're all 2/2s, like the morph creatures are 2/2s and the disguised creatures are all 2/2s. So these can wipe out the opponent's board with leaving your stuff intact. Then we've got 2 graveyard recursion in Den Protector, which is a thematic recursion spell, and Dawn, which works very well with Morph as well. We've also got 0 tutors, 0 graveyard hate, which is kind of an oof, and then at least 4 finishers of various effectiveness. There's pumps like Experiment 12 and surprise huge beaters like Frozen Cloud Scraper, which you can flip up after blockers have been declared. So the deck stats here are very impressive. It's not really lacking in any particular category. The only thing we'd want to be doing with upgrades is basically just swapping out weaker versions of certain cards for better versions. So we could replace like the weakest targeted removal with better targeted removal. But overall, the deck is functioning very, very well. There's a lot of card draw, so you smooth out your draws. You're always going to have stuff to do. There's a lot of interaction, so if you fall behind, you have a lot of ways of catching up, and it's just really impressive. The only thing that it's missing is like graveyard hate, but I can easily look over that because all the other categories are doing so well. Now for 10 quick upgrades, the first and foremost, I'm going to be adding Yaros, Roar of the Old Gods. This is amazing resiliency to removal, and you're just creatures dying, but also provides haste. And that was one thing I noticed that the Precon was lacking, is haste enablers. Yaros provides the haste and also provides that built-in resiliency, which is great. Unyielding Gatekeeper is another fantastic face-down creature. It just flips up and it's removal. It's that simple, it's awesome. Then we have Aurelia's Vindicator, another face-down creature that acts as a regrowth effect and much more. It's super versatile. It can exile problematic stuff, but then also it can get back stuff for you as well. Break Through the Line is also super important. Like I said, there's not that much haste enablers in the deck, and also your face-down creatures are pretty small, so Break Through the Line can give you evasion, so you can attack with your creatures, get past any potential blockers, and then flip them up afterwards with Kaust, which is great. Pyrotechnic Performer is another finisher for the deck. It adds a lot of extra burn to the deck, a lot of extra reach. Flourishing Bloomkin is just really nice ramp for the deck. Essence of Antiquity is great. It's targeted removal protection, but also it untaps all your creatures, giving them pseudo vigilance, and it's particularly good with our commander Kaust because that means we can activate his ability and flip up yet another creature on the same combat step. Then I'm adding Ugin the Ineffable. This is great as a source of like top end ramp, but also removal, but also card draw. The ramp part is that we can play our face down creatures for 2 less mana. So generally speaking, it's going to be 1 mana. And then it also manifests off the top of our library, and a lot of those cards on top of our library are going to be face down creatures. So we can just flip them up by themselves or with cost. And then also it doubles as removal as needed. So if there's something that needs to get blown up and it has more than one color, Ugin is going to blow it up for us. And then the final 2 cards are just going to be extra combat spells. Extra combats are really good in the deck because this is a combat focused deck. It's all about just getting in there for damage, getting in there into the attack zone. And also this untaps all our creatures when we go into the second combat. So that means we can activate cost a second time on the same turn. So this closes out games and also is just really good with our commander. So Aurelia the War Leader is the best one, I think, and Relentless Assault is another just like generically good extra combat spell. For cuts, I'm basically just cutting the weakest face down cards that are like thematic, and then some cards that just aren't really good in the deck. So Brood Hatchet and Tuco and Hooded Hydra, these can make a lot of creatures onto the battlefield, but we have not that many pump effects. Like this is not really a go wide deck, and I think they're just kind of on the weaker end. Neheb the Eternal is really interesting. Like it lets us flip up our face down creatures after combat, but like that's not exactly when we want our mana. Root Elemental can put like a face down creature onto the battlefield face up, but like that means we don't get the use out of like the triggered ability of flipping them face up, so it's not a really good effect here. Show Stopping Surprise is like an interesting board wipe, but like we just have better board wipes in this deck. This one will just explode our entire board more often than not. Ransom Note is bad, and spoiler alert, I'm taking that out of all the Precon decks, not just this one. Like Crafter's Bestiary, yeah, it draws cards, but it's one of the weakest ones because we have to keep investing mana into it. Nervous Gardener is like fine, but it's just not very exciting. It's not ramp, it's just like a card draw into our hand, but it doesn't like get 2 or more lands. It's just like a really weird delayed cantrip kind of. And then Tessek Judas Hellhound is interesting. If we had more like dogs, if it was more of a dog theme, then I would like it a lot more. We can utilize the red mana to flip up creatures during combat, so like we do have ways of utilizing the mana that it generates, but I just don't think it's good enough. Alright, for overall rankings, I'm going to give the commander an A. Calus does everything you want this deck to be doing. It generates a lot of mana advantage because you get to flip up your creatures for free, saving anywhere between like 2 to like 7 or more mana, depending on the flip costs of certain creatures in the deck. And then also provides card draw in the sense that if you flip up the creature and then it deals combat damage, you get to draw cards. All of that, access to 3 colors on a 2-drop creature, that's amazing. That's like really good. And for the 99, I'm also going to give it an A. Like, yes, not all of the Precon cards are going to be bangers individually. However, we saw the stats, like there's a lot of card draw, there's a lot of ramp, there's a lot of target removal, board wipes, all that good stuff is all here. So it's very impressive. I think the main weakness of the deck is that it's heavily reliant on its commander to do things. Face down creatures are balanced for limited, but are overcosted in commander, which our commander compensates for with the free flips and the card draw. But if Calus isn't on the battlefield, then the deck kind of struggles. This would usually knock down the rating, however Calus is only 2 mana, so recasting him a few times isn't a huge deal. So yeah, we're putting Calus in the A territory. A for the commander, A for the 99. Next, we've got Revanent Recon. This is a graveyard deck with a surveil theme to fill the graveyard. The goal of the deck is to fill the graveyard with powerful creatures using surveil, and then reanimate them to take over the game. To accomplish this goal, the deck runs 23 cards at surveil and 8 surveil payoffs, though a lot of the surveil payoffs are pretty bad. And the rest of the deck are creatures that put themselves into the graveyard, like Muldrifter, or want to be in the graveyard because they have abilities from the graveyard, like Amphin Mutineer. And there's also a lot of really good reanimation, like Necromancy. The face commander of the deck, Mirko Obsessive Theorist, is a fantastic way of combining surveil with the graveyard theme. Whenever you surveil, you get to grow Mirko Obsessive Theorist, and then on each of your end steps, you get to reanimate something with a power less than Mirko's from the graveyard onto the battlefield. So this is mana-free, repeatable reanimation on a 3-drop, which is absolutely bananas. The only downside is that the reanimated creature does come with a finality counter, so when it does die, you don't get the death trigger a second time, and it gets exiled instead of going back to the graveyard to be reanimated again. But that's a lot of value for a 3-drop in the command zone, and it could even potentially kill people in the air. It is a flying vigilance creature that grows relatively quickly, so it can be a threat even by itself. In terms of deck stats, we have 44 mana sources, 37 lands, and 7 ramp, and all the ramp are just basic mana rocks like Dimir Signet. There's 9 card draw, with the highlight being Disinformation Campaign, which is like the major payoff for a surveil deck. And the deck also has a lot more card selection with surveil cards and cantrips like Consider, but I didn't consider that draw because it doesn't put 2 or more cards into your hand, but that's something to keep in consideration. That yeah, there's a lot of surveil, there's a lot of card selection in the deck on top of the card draw. There's 10 targeted removal, almost all of which is creature removal, like Shriekmaw, for example, and a bit of bounce and 1 counter spell. There are 4 board wipes, 2 mini wipes like Massacre Worm, which can kind of double up as a finisher, and 2 full wipes like Toxic Deluge, which is a fantastic reprint here. There are 8 graveyard recursion spells, the major highlight of the deck, honestly. Plenty of great stuff like Animate Dead on the 2-drop range, and then lots more cards that can be cast from the graveyard like Deep Analysis. So it's a great mix of cards that can either reanimate anything in your deck or just can be cast from the graveyard. There are 0 tutors, 1 graveyard hate with Bojuka Bog, and then at least 2 finishers. The 2 of biggest note are Sir Conrad, which can ping out the rest of the table, and Rise of the Dark Realms, which just reanimates everything, and your opponents either have a board wipe or they lose. So the only thing the deck is really lacking is answers to non-creature threats. Otherwise, it has all its bases covered. And it could probably use more ramp. Now for the 10 quick upgrades, I'm going to throw in Search for Escanta, it's repeatable surveil, and then it turns into ramp later on. Dimir Strandcatcher is another great card for a repeatable surveilling. Starving Revenant also surveils and also generates card draw and also acts as a kind of a finisher. Then I'm adding Fane the Broker, which is really cute in this deck. It allows you to remove finality counters that are put there with our commander, the face commander Mirko. Similarly, cuteness is nesting grounds. We can move the finality counters from our own creatures over to our opponent's creatures. So not only do we remove the finality stuff from our own creatures and we get to reanimate them next time they die, but also our opponents are denied any death triggers and any good stuff like that too. Then I'm adding 2 more good reanimator targets. First is Hullbreaker Horror. This kind of addresses the lack of non-creature threat removal because it can kind of bounce anything that is threatening to us. Yeah, it's not a full fix, but it is a temporary one, and it's a great reanimation target. And then we've added Sholdred. It's just amazing. Like, it's a really good card. It's removal on one end, and then you can turn it into a saga that kind of just wins you the game. And then finally, I'm adding Body Double. Our commander is so powerful in terms of reanimation that we might as well have a second version of it onto the battlefield, and it comes with a +1/+1 counter on it, which is actually relevant because that means we can start reanimating bigger things with it. In terms of cuts, I'm mostly focusing on like the basically do nothing cards, the little cantrips and whatnot that kind of maybe they surveil a little bit, but they're just not worth the mana. So Brainstorm, I'm not quite sure why Brainstorm is here. I guess it kind of works with surveil, but it's just not good enough in my opinion. Otherworldly Gaze, you just don't want to be spending that much mana on surveilling. Same with Curate, it's just not worth it. Counterpoint is a really cute counter spell, but it's 5 mana and we're not really a draw go deck, so it's kind of hard to keep up that mana in this deck. Ransom Note, again, just not good. Foreboding Steamboat is like the weakest removal we have in the deck. Temple of the False God, it's not good here. Why is it here? I don't know. And then we're just cutting a couple cards. Sphinx of the Second Sun, if this can copy like our end step triggers and work with Mirko, I would keep it in, but it just doesn't. And then the 2 Surveil payoff creatures, Thoughtbound Phantasm and Dimir Spybog, like they grow at a decent rate in this deck, but they're awful to draw like mid to late game. And even if you drop them on curve, they're still just not that very impressive. Like they just don't grow as quickly as like a Mana Gorge or Hydra, you know? Also a quick shout out to like the more aristocrat-y investigate creatures, like Eloise would be fantastic in this deck, but the deck just doesn't have any aristocrat support. It's not really sacrificing its creatures for value. So I wouldn't put in Eloise or like Sanguine Spy or like Seer of Stolen Sight. Like these are awesome cards and I wish I could run it, but the deck would require a serious overhaul before they would be really good. Okay, overall rankings. I'm gonna give the commander a solid A. Mirko is fantastic in terms of reanimation and provides a pretty decent reason to go for Surveil, which is a very small card pool to work with. But I'm going to give the 99 a B. So Revanent Recon is a graveyard deck. It's focusing hard on its Surveil theme, which I find very admirable because it's trying something unique. The problem is that Surveil has an incredibly limited card pool and most of the cards suck outside of limited, and the deck has some incredible cards in it, but then it has plenty of fillers like Curate and Otherworldly Gaze just to pad the Surveil count, and while they're not unplayable or anything, they just don't do much other than trigger Surveil payoffs, and you don't want to see them in your games, leading to consistency issues. Like Deadly Dispute, our commander props up the weak archetype, but weirdly enough, it's actually optimal to just ignore the Surveil mechanic and pump Mirko more efficient ways without having to run unoptimal Surveil cards. Like you can throw on Blackblade Reforged and just ignore like Surveil cards and you'd already have a more effective Reanimator commander. So that's kind of a bummer, but I would say there's a lot of really good cards in the Precon. It's just a shame that not 100 of it is like super cohesive or anything, and it's really kind of held back by Surveil, to be honest. Next up, we have Deep Clue C, which is a clue deck with a Drawing Matters sub-theme. The goal of the deck is to make a bunch of clue tokens with cards like Lonus, make even more tokens by doubling up the tokens you're producing with cards like Adrix and Nev, drawing tons of cards off your tokens with cards like Shimmer Dragon, and then utilize those tokens to do a bunch of broken things like dropping down Essex and making clones of the best thing on the battlefield, and then just like win the game with like the new Kelp card. The deck is led by the new face commander Morska Undersea Sleuth. It's a Bant fish detective Vidalkin thingy. It's not a merfolk. And this is a really boring creature. It's just like a 2/3. It gives you no maximum hand size, which is nice. Upkeep step, it investigates, so it makes you 1 clue token, and then it grows as you're drawing your second card each turn, so it kind of does everything the deck wants to be doing, but it just does it in a very boring way. Like it just doesn't do that much. It just kind of sits there and accumulates like very marginal value, and it's just not very inspiring. That's my hot take. It's not really a hot take though. Anywho, the deck actually performs its goals very admirably. It has 28 token makers, 19 cards that make clue tokens, and then 9 more that make other kinds of tokens, like mostly food, like killer service, but also random tokens like insects of Hornet Queen or bees. There are 24 cards that utilize tokens, some broadly, like Junk Winder, but most of them focus on artifacts like Shimmer Dragon. And then there are 10 cards that care about drawing cards, like Jolriel. So the card drawing matters thing is very much a sub-theme. In terms of deck stats, I count 50 mana sources, 37 lands, and 13 ramp, 23 card draw. The vast majority is just clue tokens, but there's a couple powerhouse options like Shimmer Dragon and Shoe Lane. There are 4 targeted removal spells. The deck just doesn't believe in spot removal, it seems. There are 3 board wipes, with Farewell being a huge reprint. There's 0 Graveyard Recursion, which is kind of odd in a green deck. 0 Tutors, 0 Graveyard Hate, 6 Finishers, some focusing on combat, like the Kelp and Knowledge is Power, some on Drain, turning your card draw into a Drain effect with Psychosis Crawler, and there's even an alternate win condition with Mechanized Production. So this deck doesn't really believe in interacting with the board. The plan is to be the problem, basically. Try to do the busted things faster than any opponent, and then close out games with a finisher. That's an admirable plan, but the lack of removal and the total lack of recursion is definitely a problem, especially if your opponents just get to pop off faster than you and you don't have that many ways of catching back up. So in terms of quick adds, I'm going to be adding a bunch of the good remaining clue generators. So we have Tamio's Journal, which is one of the best payoffs that isn't in the deck. It generates clues and then acts as tutor for the deck. Officious Interrogation I actually think is quite good in the deck because sometimes you just don't have like a clue generator, and this you can play even if you have nothing else going on, and then bam, you have just a huge collection of clues to do your nasty things with. Kellen, Inquisitive Prodigy, is really nice in the deck. Not only can it act as like ramp, and it also generates a clue, but then it turns the clue into more mana efficient card draw, but also it acts as removal, which the deck desperately needs. Then we're adding 2 of the best ramp options in any sort of like artifact token deck: Jaheira, Friend of the Forest, and Urza, Lord High Artificer. Both of these cards turn your clues into just mana rocks, which is absolutely busted. Then I'm adding Sarenth Steel Seeker, which is just amazing card advantage in a clue deck. And I'm throwing in Dispatch. It's a 1 mana Source of Plowshares, but it's even better in a clue deck because you don't even give your opponent any life gain. Soul Guide Lantern is in there because it now adds some Graveyard Hate to the deck, and also you can pop it to draw a card. Shigeki Jukai Visionary. It can ramp early on, but later on, you can channel it and get back a bunch of cards from your graveyard. The last card I'm adding is Cyberdrive Awakener. This is just one of the best finishers in a clue deck. It turns your clues into 4/4s and it gives them flying, and then you just smash and win the game. In terms of quick cuts, Hydroid Crassus just costs way too much mana for the amount of cards you're drawing off it. Serene Sleuth is interesting. It is really good in like a Goad meta. So if you're playing against like the Boros Goad deck that we're going to be talking about later on in the video, then it's really good here. Otherwise though, like if you're not in a Goad meta, it just doesn't really do much. Nadir Kraken like fits the theme and everything, but it costs just way too much mana to keep it going. Sophia Dogged Detective is great in a dog deck, but there's no other dogs in this deck. Finale of Revelation, just 2 mana efficient for drawing cards. Ransom Note is Ransom Note. Magnifying Glass is just not very good. Armed with Proof is a very cute card, but just 2 mana inefficient. Wilderness Reclamation is cute in terms of adding more mana to crack your clues, but we just have better ways of cracking your clues and using them for mana. And then finally, Knowledge is Power is like a cute finisher. It's kind of thematic, but like we just added Cyberdrive Awakener and we just don't need any more finishers, and this is the weakest of the bunch. All right, overall rankings. When I first skimmed over this Precon and saw how many amazing reprints there are in it, I thought for sure this would be the best Precon I ever reviewed. However, after examining the full list, seeing the lack of interaction and complete absence of recursion, plus a lot of frankly clunky cards, I have to say that the 99 has consistency issues. You could have the perfect draw of cards like Academy Manufacturer into Adrix and Nev, into Essex, and then like make 1,000 tokens of something and feel like a Gon, assuming your opponents have 0 removal as well. But you're just as likely to draw into the wrong side of your deck or simply have your opponents pop off without you having any answers because the deck just doesn't have that much interaction. And also, the face commander is boring as heck. It's not that strong. It's 3 mana, it provides some decent value, and it's not terrible or anything, but it's just not very exciting, it's not super strong, and it's just boring. It's just a boring card. So this is gonna get a lot of people angry at me, but I'm actually gonna give the commander a B, and the 99 also a B. It's just too inconsistent. There's a lot of bad cards in it. Yeah, there's a lot of like busted things that you could potentially do with it, but it just lacks interaction and it's just kind of hoping for the best. It's hoping for your opponents to pop off slower than you and not really interact with you. All right, the final commander deck is Blame Game. This is a Boros politics deck whose goal is to make your opponents attack each other, lowering their life totals while keeping yours high before you finish them off for the win. The deck accomplishes this with a mix of Goad, like Vengeful Ancestor, Pillow Fort, like Kazul Tyrant of Cliffs, Rattlesnakes, like Soul Snare, Bribes, like Orzhov Advocist, Fogs, like Comeuppance, and damage amplifiers used against opponents like Gisela. The face commander is Nelly Borka, Impulsive Accuser, and it does exactly what the deck wants to be doing. It goads creatures whenever it's attacking, but also it provides another type of incentive to attack each other. If your opponents attack each other, then they get to draw a card, and you get to draw a card, but more importantly, they get to draw a card as well too. So there's 2 different ways that Nelly Borka is interacting with the table and providing 2 very different styles of forcing your opponents or encouraging your opponents to attack and kill each other. Now, in terms of committing to the goal, there are a whopping 39 of these cards that encourage opponents to attack each other in the deck. So it's fully committed to politics. Though a lot of people would call it a goad deck, it actually doesn't have that many goad cards. It really uses a mix of encouragement to get people to attack each other, and goad is just one subset of it. In terms of deck stats, we've got 47 mana, 37 lands, and 10 ramp, only 5 card draw, which is shockingly little, and only 4 targeted removal. All but 1 are disenchants, like the Steel Hellkite, and I'm not counting the handful of cards that only work if you're being attacked by a creature like Soul Snare, because that's way too situational. There are 4 board wipes, 2 graveyard recursion, 0 tutors, 1 graveyard hate, and at least 4 finishers. Gisela and Fiendish Duo double damage to your opponents, so it's a really good finisher they could drop down to either win the game yourself or just like speed up your opponent's demises when they attack each other. Anya is Indestructible Beats, I absolutely love her. And then Prisoner's Dilemma is a cute way to just like burn at least one of the people out of the game, and it has flashback, which is very cute. So this deck runs only a single card that can remove creatures without that creature attacking you outside of board wipes, and that's Steel Hellkite. And that one's not very good either. It's basically all in on getting threatening creatures to attack elsewhere, which is only good against attacking creatures, not really utility creatures or combo creatures. Like, yes, sometimes those utility and combo creatures are kind of small and then they're going to attack into blockers and die, but that's not something I want to rely upon to deal with those creatures. Either way, it also has extremely little card draw, and I have no idea why. Like, yeah, our commander can draw cards, but not that much, and it's not always going to be on the battlefield. So those are things I would address in the upgrade section. Speaking of, these are my quick adds. Taunt from the Rampart is one of the best goad cards missing in the deck. It also removes any potential blockers from the equation too, including for our own attacks, which is really nice. Life of the Party provides attackers for all of your opponents and goads them. That's always great. Grenzo Havoc Razor provides goading, which is all the deck wants to be doing, but also it can provide card advantage, which the deck seriously lacks. Bothersome Quasit is another goad enabler, but more importantly, it removes the opportunity for our opponents to block our creatures. And, you know, our deck really needs evasion because a lot of our creatures need to be attacking. Aurelia the Law Above is going to provide an excellent source of card draw in our deck because we're going to be attacking with our creatures, drawing cards off Aurelia, but then we're also forcing all of our opponents to attack each other, drawing us even more cards as well too. Source of Plowshares, it's a staple removal spell, and the deck really has very few spot removal spells for creatures. Agris Cause, Spirit of Justice, works really well with Nelly because it works very well with the Suspect ability of Nelly, and it doubles as creature removal, which is really good. So either it helps us goad or it just removes creatures. Both of them are great here. Boris Signet is just missing in the deck and allows us to drop down a turn 3 Nelly more consistently. Iroas, God of Victory, again, helps our creatures attack. Like Nelly is just a 2/4 with Vigilance, has no sort of evasion. And if we want to use her ability, she has to survive combat, so Iroas works that way. And then surprise, surprise, the red decks want extra combat, so I threw in Aurelia the War Leader, which means more Nelly triggers and other triggers as well too. For quick cuts, I'm taking on Boros Reckoner, which is like an okay blocker, but like there's no Blasphemous Act or anything that really combos with it. Feather Radiant Arbiter, it would have been great if we had like a lot of auras or whatever, but there aren't really that many here. Stalking Leonin is like one of the weakest like rattlesnakes in the deck, so I took it out. Darien, King of Gelder, is another like rattlesnake that just costs 6 mana, is very unappealing. Steel Hellkite is just bad. It's like overcosted. Ancient Stone Idol is another like one of those like Pillar 4T cards. Fog, Pseudo Fogs, it's not very good. Same with Gideon's Sacrifice, just not very good. Ransom Note, not good. And then Vow of Duty and Vow of Lightning, like they kind of fit the theme too, but they're just kind of weak in comparison to like all the impetuses and other ways we can enchant and force our opponents to attack. These ones don't force our opponents to attack. Okay, overall rankings. I think the commander is an easy A. Nelly is the perfect politics commander, providing 2 separate incentives for your opponents to attack each other, and also providing card advantage, which is much needed in the deck. The crucial thing she lacks is evasion to trigger her own ability easily, and also protection, but like we can work around those at least. And the 99, I'm going to give a B. The 99 is a great mix of ways to encourage opponents to attack each other. At most casual tables where the meta is overwhelmingly combat focused, this is a good call. However, the strategy does fall apart when you're at tables that don't care to cast creatures that often. If you're like in heavy combo metas, or even like a sacrifice deck that wants to play creatures but then doesn't necessarily want to keep them around long enough for them to be attacking anyway. Either way, even if this is like a perfect meta choice for your playgroups, the lack of card draw is definitely a weakness and seems like a major oversight. So Commander is an A, the 99 is a B, so I'm just gonna give it like a B plus, A minus, you know, somewhere in there. So there you have it. I actually think Deadly Dispute is the best main precon out of the bunch. I think it is the best out of the bunch, and I know a lot of people are going to be mad at me, but I think Deep Blue Sea is actually the worst. Like, yes, it has some very amazing reprints in it. Yes, it can do busted things, but overall, I think it is actually the weakest of the bunch, even though B is not a bad rating. Like, if we looked at like, you know, 2015 or earlier precons, they would not be getting Bs, my friend, let me tell you. But anyway, hopefully that helps you decide which commanders, which precons you want to be picking up. Let me know what you think about the ranking in the comment section below. I'll be back soon with Murders at Karlov Manor, commander breakdowns like budget brews and whatnot soon. So until then, friends, see ya!